Hailed by Guitar Magazine as the best new guitarist in 1989, Jason Becker was set to be the next guitar virtuoso, following in the footsteps of Steve Vai, Eddie Van Halen, Eric Clapton, and Jimi Hendrix. But within a few short years, he wouldn't even be able to play the guitar, let alone pick it up, after being diagnosed with a life-changing illness. Today, let's take a look at the story of Jason Becker. Jason Eli Becker was born in California to a musical family, as his father and uncle were guitar players. The budding musician picked up the guitar at age 5, and from a young age was extremely driven to master the instrument, spending upwards of 10 hours a day practicing. Despite growing up in a predominantly black neighborhood, he didn't gravitate towards hip-hop, instead being heavily influenced by the likes of Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, Eddie Van Halen, and by the time he was a teenager, he soon learned their songs note for note. By the time he was 13, he was able to give lessons to his own music teacher, and it was around this age he was playing some of his first gigs, while also incorporating some pretty impressive theatrics, including playing guitar with one hand and playing with a yo-yo in the other. It would be Shrapnel Records head Mike Varney who heard a demo tape of Becker and was blown away. Varney suggested that Becker hook up with an older musician, guitarist Marty Friedman, on the label's band Cacophony. They would record a record, and despite not being popular in America, they toured Japan and sold out all of their performances in Europe. By 1990, Friedman would depart Cacophony and join Megadeth. I've done a whole video on Friedman's time in Megadeth, the link is down below. There would be no bad blood between the pair, and Becker would end up joining David Lee Roth's band in 1990, in time for his record A Little Ain't Enough, replacing Steve Vai, who had gone off to Whitesnake. The foreshadowing of what was to happen to Becker happened during his days in Cacophony. He would suffer from constant pain in one of his legs that he initially thought may be a pinched nerve from carrying his musical equipment around. At the time, he was 19, and like a lot of young people, he thought he was indestructible and didn't see a doctor at the time. His health issues didn't impact his audition for David Lee Roth, as he got the job on the first try. The former Van Halen frontman would write in his book Crazy from the Heat, his parents had been Haight-Ashbury hippies, so instead of growing up listening to Eddie Van Halen and duplicating that, he'd grown up listening to all the old classics I had: Hendrix, Dylan, Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Roth's label Warner, according to Louder Sound, would give Becker a check for $75,000 in addition to a Christmas bonus of $500, as well as royalties from Roth's upcoming album. Becker's career couldn't have gone off to a better start. The band would head to Vancouver to record with Metallica and Mötley Crüe producer Bob Rock, but that limp of Jason's had only gotten worse, and he was now struggling to even play guitar in the studio, let alone play the track he wrote for the album, Drop in the Bucket. It was one day in the studio after being frustrated with his playing, he locked himself in the bathroom and noticed his hands looked different. He soon visited a doctor and was diagnosed with ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease, a neuromuscular condition that took away Jason's ability to control his body. The doctors gave Jason 3 to 5 years to live, but the guitarist refused to believe it. His boss, David Lee Roth, would be heartbroken by the news, telling Louder Sound, "Man, I cried when the verdict came in. Trying to hire genius is damn near impossible, but I came close with Jason. You could feel the heat coming off of him. That kid could move air. He had such a full, substantial sound, played through the simplest equipment, and the kindest, gentlest, absorbing, wanting to learn spirit I've ever worked with. The world was waiting to paint his picture, man, and he got struck down way too effing early." Within a few years of him leaving David Lee Roth's band, Jason's health deteriorated rapidly. He went from walking with a cane to being in a wheelchair to being no longer able to speak, let alone play guitar. While ALS may have robbed him of his physical abilities, his mind was still sharp. His father would devise an alphabet board that allowed him to communicate with his son. Not only that, but Jason, even to this very day, is still creating music. Here's a good news story summarizing how Jason is doing that.
Could no longer play guitar, he began composing on a keyboard. When he could no longer move his hands, he used a computer. He had a special visor with a sensor on top that moved the cursor on the screen. When Jason opened his mouth, his chin clicked the mouse. But as Jason's health got worse, he lost the ability to speak and even to move his head. Jason worked on this new music with his friend and producer Dan Alvarez. Again, they composed at a computer, but this time Jason had to relay his ideas through his father or another interpreter.
You want thicker chords?
Right. Big-name guitarists, including Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, and many others, played on the final recording. Jason even worked in some sound from his ventilator.
Jason is still alive today, and he's 53 years old, being taken care of by his parents, but they are getting older and have admitted it's a 24/7 job, and have been nearly one paycheck away from losing their home. Jason Becker's most recent album was 2018's Triumphant Hearts. Becker would launch a campaign to fund the album, which initially raised more than $100,000. The record would include guest appearances from his former bandmate, guitarist Marty Friedman, as well as Joe Satriani, Paul Gilbert, and Steve Vai. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe. We'll see you again in Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.